Polonium poisoning in London. On November 1st, 2006, a former FSB officer met two men at the Millennium Hotel in central London. He was a former officer of the FSB, Russia's intelligence service, who had fled to Britain years earlier. He had become one of the Kremlin's most vocal critics, writing articles and giving interviews that accused Russian officials of corruption and wrongdoing. That afternoon, he sat down in the hotel's Pine Bar with two Russian contacts he had known from his days in intelligence. They ordered tea. He drank from a white ceramic teapot. The liquid was colorless, odorless, and tasted normal. Within the hours, he began vomiting. At first, doctors suspected food poisoning, but his condition worsened rapidly. His white blood cell count plummeted. His immune system collapsed. Hair began falling from his head in clumps. Medical teams could not identify what was killing him. Tests came back negative for common poisons. It was not until days later that scientists discovered traces of polonium-210 in his urine. Polonium is a radioactive element so rare that only micrograms exist in nature. It emits alpha particles that destroy cells on contact. He had ingested enough to kill him several times over. The polonium burned through his organs from the inside. His bone marrow stopped producing blood cells. His digestive system disintegrated. His skin turned pale and thin. He remained conscious throughout, aware that he was dying and unable to stop it. Doctors isolated him in a sealed room as radiation detectors confirmed his body was emitting dangerous levels of contamination. On November 23rd, 22 days after drinking the tea, the former FSB officer died in University College Hospital. Before his death, he gave a statement accusing Russian President Vladimir Putin of ordering his murder. Investigators later found radioactive traces across London, in hotels, restaurants, and even on British Airways aircraft. The two Russian contacts fled to Russia and were never extradited. Killed by a Ricin umbrella pellet. On September 7, 1978, a Bulgarian novelist and journalist waited at a bus stop on Waterloo Bridge in London. He was a Bulgarian novelist and journalist who had defected to the West years earlier. He worked for the BBC World Service and Radio Free Europe, broadcasting reports that criticized the Bulgarian communist government. That afternoon, as crowds moved past him on the bridge, he felt a sharp sting in the back of his right thigh. He turned and saw a man picking up an umbrella from the ground. The man apologized in a foreign accent, then quickly hailed a taxi and disappeared. He thought little of it. By that evening, he developed a high fever. The small puncture wound on his leg became inflamed and painful. He went to the hospital, where doctors initially suspected an infection, but his condition deteriorated rapidly. His temperature spiked above 104 degrees. His white blood cell count dropped to dangerous levels. His heart struggled to maintain rhythm. Within 48 hours, his kidneys began shutting down. He vomited repeatedly and could not keep fluids in his body. Doctors worked frantically to stabilize him, but they had no idea what was causing the organ failure. He remained conscious enough to tell them about the umbrella sting. On September 11th, 4 days after the attack, the Bulgarian novelist and journalist died. An autopsy revealed a tiny metallic pellet embedded in his thigh, measuring just 1.52 millimeters in diameter. The pellet had two microscopic holes drilled into it, designed to hold a toxin. Forensic scientists identified the substance as ricin, a poison derived from castor beans that has no known antidote. Ricin works by stopping protein production in cells, causing the organs to fail one by one. The assassination was traced to the Bulgarian secret police working with assistance from the Soviet KGB. The man with the umbrella was never identified or caught. Public hanging. After deep cover espionage. On January 18, 1965, Syrian intelligence officers arrested a man they knew under an alias in his Damascus apartment. His real identity was that of an Israeli Mossad agent who had spent 3 years embedded in Syria's political and military elite. He had befriended generals, attended classified military briefings, and toured fortified positions along the Golan Heights. He sent detailed intelligence back to Tel Aviv using a hidden radio transmitter, which Syrian counterintelligence eventually detected. His trial lasted weeks. Syrian officials paraded him before cameras, using his capture as proof of Israeli infiltration. He was sentenced to death by hanging. On May 18, 1965, he was led to a gallows erected in Marjeh Square in central Damascus. Thousands gathered to watch. Cameras broadcast the event live across Syria. The executioners placed a noose around his neck. The method was not designed for a quick death. When the trapdoor opened, his body dropped, but the fall was not long enough to break his neck cleanly. Instead, his own body weight strangled him slowly. His legs kicked involuntarily as the rope crushed his windpipe. His face turned dark red, then purple. The crowd watched in silence as he struggled for air. It took several minutes for him to lose consciousness. His body continued twitching as oxygen was cut off from his brain. Slowly, the movement stopped. Syrian guards left his body hanging for hours as a public warning. Television stations replayed footage of the hanging throughout the day. Israel requested the return of his remains, but Syria refused. His body was buried in an unmarked grave. Decades later, his story became one of the most famous cases of deep cover espionage in intelligence history, and Syria continued to deny requests to return his body to his family. Double agent falls from a London balcony. On June 27, 2007, an Egyptian billionaire fell from the fifth-floor balcony of his London apartment at Carlton House Terrace. He was an Egyptian billionaire and the son-in-law of former Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser. For decades, he had operated as one of the most valuable double agents of the Cold War era. He passed Egyptian military secrets to Israeli intelligence, including advance warning of the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Some historians believed he was actually loyal to Egypt and fed Israel misinformation. Others insisted he genuinely worked for the Mossad. Weeks before his death, a book had publicly named him as an Israeli spy. The revelation placed him under intense scrutiny from multiple intelligence agencies. That morning, he stepped onto his balcony. Moments later, his body struck the pavement below. A fall from the fifth floor does not always kill instantly. He suffered multiple fractures to his spine, ribs, and skull. His lungs were punctured by broken bones. Blood began filling his chest cavity, making each breath feel like drowning. When paramedics arrived, he was still conscious. His eyes moved and he tried to speak, but no words came out. Air escaped through holes in his lungs instead of reaching his throat. The internal bleeding accelerated. His blood pressure dropped rapidly as fluid accumulated around his heart. Medics worked to stabilize him, but the damage was too severe. His organs were shutting down from shock and blood loss. Within minutes, the Egyptian billionaire died on the street before the ambulance could transport him to a hospital. British police investigated the incident as a possible homicide. His family insisted he had been murdered, claiming he knew too much and had become a liability. Others suggested he chose to leave rather than face exposure. The inquest returned an open verdict, unable to determine whether he fell, jumped, or was pushed. Murdered and dismembered in a consulate. On October 2nd, 2018, a journalist entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to collect documents for his upcoming marriage. He was a journalist and former Saudi intelligence insider who had become a prominent critic of the Saudi government. He wrote columns for the Washington Post that questioned Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's policies. His fiancée waited outside the building as he went in. Inside, a 15-man team had arrived hours earlier on 2 private jets from Riyadh. The group included intelligence operatives, forensic specialists, and a doctor who brought a bone saw. He was grabbed immediately as he entered. He struggled, but he was outnumbered. The team injected him with a sedative to weaken his resistance, but he remained conscious. Turkish intelligence later recovered audio recordings from listening devices inside the consulate. The recordings captured his voice as he realized what was happening. He fought for air as a plastic bag was placed over his head. The suffocation was not instant. He could hear his own choking sounds and the voices of the men around him. His lungs burned as he tried to pull oxygen through the sealed plastic. It took 7 minutes for him to stop breathing. Afterward, the team dismembered his body to remove it from the building. The forensic specialist worked methodically while the others cleaned the scene. Outside, his fiancée continued waiting, unaware of what had occurred inside. She stood at the consulate entrance for 11 hours before leaving. His body was never recovered. Turkish authorities released details of the audio evidence, which confirmed premeditated involvement. Saudi Arabia initially denied any knowledge, then claimed he died in a fistfight, before finally acknowledging it was a planned operation. Several members of the hit squad were later tried in Saudi courts, though the masterminds faced no consequences. VX nerve agent attack in an airport. On February 13, 2017, the older half-brother of a North Korean leader walked through the departure hall of Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia. He was the older half-brother of that North Korean leader and had lived in exile for years. He maintained contacts with foreign intelligence services and had publicly criticized the North Korean regime. That morning, as he checked in for a flight to Macau, 2 women approached him from different directions. The first woman wiped a cloth across his face. Seconds later, the second woman did the same. Both walked away quickly and washed their hands in nearby restrooms. He felt an immediate burning sensation on his skin. He stumbled toward an information desk and told staff that someone had grabbed him and sprayed something on his face. The substance was VX nerve agent, one of the most lethal chemical weapons ever created. VX shuts down the nervous system by blocking an enzyme that controls muscle function. Within moments, his vision began to blur. His chest tightened as his lungs struggled to draw air. Security footage showed him staggering through the terminal, visibly disoriented and in distress. Airport medics arrived and tried to help, but they did not know what they were dealing with. His body began convulsing as the nerve agent paralyzed his respiratory muscles. He could not breathe properly. His heart raced as his brain sent desperate signals that his body could no longer obey. Paralysis spread through his limbs. Medics rushed him toward an ambulance, but his condition deteriorated rapidly. 20 minutes after the attack, the North Korean leader's half-brother died in the ambulance before reaching the hospital. Investigators later determined that each woman had applied half of a binary agent that became lethal only when combined on his face. Both women were arrested and claimed they believed they were participating in a prank television show. North Korea denied any involvement in the assassination. CIA scientist falls from a hotel window. On November 28, 1953, a CIA biochemist crashed through the closed window of room 1018A at the Statler Hotel in New York City. He was a biochemist working for the CIA's Special Operations Division, which developed biological weapons and interrogation techniques. 9 days earlier, he had attended a retreat at Deep Creek Lodge in Maryland with other CIA scientists. During that meeting, his supervisor secretly dosed his after-dinner drink with rainbow candy as part of the MK Ultra program. He had no idea he had been drugged. The effects were severe. He became paranoid and anxious, convinced that his colleagues were plotting against him. He told his wife he had made a terrible mistake at work and wanted to resign from the program. The CIA sent him to New York with a handler, officially to see a psychiatrist, but also to keep him under watch. At 2:30 in the morning, he ran toward the window. His body crashed through the glass pane, and he plummeted 13 floors to the sidewalk below. The fall shattered bones throughout his body. His skull fractured on impact. Glass from the window had cut deep lacerations across his face and arms. When police arrived, he was still alive. Blood filled his lungs, making each breath a gurgling struggle. He tried to speak, but could not form words. His handler was in the room when it happened. The handler called his CIA supervisor before calling the front desk. The biochemist died on the pavement within minutes. The official story called it self-unaliving triggered by depression. His family accepted this explanation for 22 years. In 1975, documents revealed the rainbow candy dosing. His body was exhumed in 1994. A new autopsy found blunt force trauma to his head consistent with a blow before the fall, suggesting he may have been struck unconscious and thrown from the window. Hanged after exposing Nazi secrets. On November 7, 1944, a German journalist was led to the gallows at Sugamo Prison in Tokyo. He was a German journalist who had operated as a master Soviet spy in Japan for years. He had built an extensive intelligence network that warned Moscow of critical information, including Japan's decision not to attack the Soviet Union and details of Nazi Germany's plans to invade. Japanese counterintelligence arrested him in October 1941 after intercepting his radio transmissions. For 3 years, he endured a very uncomfortable time in Japanese custody. Interrogators demanded the names of his network and details of his operations. He refused to provide anything of value. Despite the physical suffering, he maintained silence about his methods and contacts. Soviet leader Joseph Stalin refused prisoner exchange offers, effectively disowning him to protect the regime from embarrassment. On the morning of his game overing, guards brought him to the execution chamber. Japanese hanging methods were designed for slow strangulation rather than instant death. The executioners placed a rope around his neck and positioned him on the trap door. When the door opened, his body dropped, but the fall was calculated to be too short to break his cervical spine cleanly. His body weight pulled against the noose, crushing his windpipe gradually. He could not draw air into his lungs. His legs kicked reflexively as his brain fought for oxygen. The guards watched without expression as the strangulation continued. His face darkened as blood flow was restricted. Consciousness began fading in waves, moments of clarity alternating with blackness. It took 4 to 5 minutes for the suffocation to complete. His body continued twitching as the final neural signals misfired. Eventually, all movement ceased. The German journalist was pronounced dead at 8:26 in the morning. His remains were cremated, and years later the Soviet Union posthumously named him Hero of the Soviet Union. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.